Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next installment of Azure Cloud Talk. I'm one of your hosts, Alec here with Brian. How's it going, Brian?
It's going great, Alec. How are you doing?
Not too bad. We're supposed to have some storms roll through here tonight, so hopefully everything turns out okay. But otherwise, I think we're recording this just because there's plans of, I think you're going to be gone for 2 Fridays for MVP Summit and MCT Summit. Um,
I'm
so this
always
one might
gone.
be this might be a backfill episode, but hopefully we get some cool people out there, and if the time comes or if it feels right, we can record an episode or two. But also don't want to stress out about that if we have fun goofing around and doing other stuff with other MVPs. So, have you been to MVP Summit before, Brian?
I have 2 years ago, and then I didn't go last year because I was on contract. I'm actually on a contract this year, but worked out getting a sub for the week so that I could go to the summit because missing 1 year is probably okay. Missing 2 years is, I don't know. It just seems like you're missing too much because there's a real, I mean, you can watch the online versions if you're an MVP and all that jazz. But if you're like me, you sign up for the online versions and then you don't necessarily have the time to actually go back and watch them. So I was working, so I couldn't do it live. And thereby, hey, I have my backpack, how Microsoft kind of does the backpack where you end up with all the stuff that you have. And I mean, you can watch them back for a certain amount of time, but for whatever reason, it's just not the same. And it's way more fun to be out there and like the hallway conversations and stuff. So of course, being on Microsoft campus feels a little surreal. You're kind of like, I made it. I didn't really make it, but I made it. It's kind of cool.
But I don't actually work for Microsoft, but here I am kind of being recognized by Microsoft.
But if it wasn't for Microsoft, I probably wouldn't have had a job the last 25 years. So even though I don't work for them, I basically work because of them.
Right. I think the other thing, so I've never been before, but what you said is kind of my feeling with conferences too. Like, Microsoft Build has an online track, and there's some online exclusives, and it's cool. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. It's super cool if you plan time to, like, hey, I'm going to be heads down out of work, or in Omaha, they do watch parties sometimes, or like .NET Conf watch parties of like, I'm going to plan to not be super heads down at work. I'm going to block off time and I'm going to watch this live with everybody. Because then you even still have like the hype of the internet, right? Like people are posting like, oh my God, even the people there posting on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, LinkedIn. So you still feel like a part of it. I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Like if it's already happened, I'm like, well, I'm going to catch the next thing live. And the next thing comes out, the next thing comes out. I see people's opinions on it, or don't even like really didn't see a big wave. So it's like, maybe it's not that important. And then, fast forward a couple months, because it's the same with Build. Microsoft builds contents out there for 6 months, maybe even a year. Then you have your virtual backpack and all this sort of fun stuff. And then you just don't ever go back to review it. And it's like, well, if it was a huge enough impact, it's affecting my day-to-day life. If it's not, like, I'm not really aware of the content or what happened. And I feel like that's kind of where I get. So it's why I kind of like avoid, if I can, virtual conferences with like if I have the option and opportunity to be in person, because I'm kind of the same boat as you. Like I'll get sidetracked on work, I'll miss the one I really wanted to go see, and maybe there's a handful I still do catch, but it's not the same.
Yeah. And then, there's 6 different things happening at once. I don't know, like Build. For me, Build is weird because there are, most conferences are like 4 tracks. They're all an hour long and they're all side by side. And Build is kind of like, well, this one might be 7 minutes long and it starts at 2:30, and this one might be 15 minutes long. It starts at 2:55 or something ridiculous, right? And it's like hard to organize your day virtually in that scenario. And I always end up finding like 3 of them, and it's like, well, you've got a conflict. I'm like, add it anyway, because then it'll be in my backpack. But at the end of the day, like at least that option's available to be able to watch back and catch up on something, especially when you do find out maybe even a month later that something was released at Build that you're like, oh, hey, I need to know more about this. Is there a video or, a talk about it that I can watch quick that kind of summarizes the problem I'm having right now. They changed something again, like Azure App Service not being a automatic failover into a regional deployment with disaster recovery starting at the end of the month.
Yeah,
So
that is a thing. I think it's also so Microsoft does a pretty good job of being inclusive for all time zones and all people where there's like little hot spots in different countries. So that's where it also can potentially get difficult too, is because when build starts, build doesn't actually end until build ends. Because when North America goes to sleep, you have like Australia picking it up and Japan and like all these other different places that are still putting out content. And Microsoft also finds ways to like re-queue the content so it's like fresh for them. So even if it doesn't fit your thing, or you might be super excited about something, but hey, it's the Australian team putting it on, and like the time zone is weird because, they're on the other side of the world, or maybe it's not in the language of choice for you, or all those different things, right? Like build doesn't sleep. It's the same as I think reInvent kind of, right? You still have all of and Ignite, you have all the announcements, you have people all over because it's virtual too, that there's just some weird time zone stuff and all that, it's a great problem to have, I think, versus the alternative of if you either have to get up at the North American time or you're in trouble. Like there's even people, because where we live, they kick off at like, what is it, 9 or 10 Pacific, which it ends up being like 11, 12 our
usually
time-ish.
10. Yeah. It's usually. Yeah, I always do this back. I jokingly say this. I don't know if it's really joke. Sorry. I always reverse. It's like I'm dyslexic with time zones. So like, if it's 2 hours ahead of us or behind us, so Seattle's 2 hours behind us. So 12 p.m. here is 10 a.m. there. I will notoriously schedule a meeting or accept a meeting that starts at 12 p.m. their time, and I will think it should start at 10 a.m. my time. Notoriously, I do it every time, and I'm like, I can take this meeting. It starts at 10 a.m. It's perfect, and I'm like, no, wait, that's actually 2 p.m. our time, and I
Time
do the same
zones
thing
are
with
awesome.
directions. I feel really bad. One time I was in Ames, and I told this lady that she needs to go west on the highway when she needed to go east. Because I'm forever saying the direction. So if I'm west of the direction that I need to go, I will say west, even though I mean to go east, because I'm west of where I'm going, or vice versa. Now, in my defense, I did tell her to go over the interstate and take a right, which would have gotten her on the eastern bound road. But who knows if she made it? She may be still driving to Omaha she may be still be driving. Well, this was 15 years ago, so 20 years ago. I'm sure she made it.
Sure, she maybe turned around and be like, that guy doesn't know. Or
Well, she
she's
probably,
been,
yeah. She would have got to Carroll and been like, wait, why am I in Carroll?
or she just was lost for long enough to get GPS, and now she's like, that guy.
He told me the wrong direction. I'm totally screwed. I was just trying to get to Minneapolis.
Yeah.
I'm in Sioux Falls.
I think this is a fun analogy, but as far as directions and getting lost, you've started dabbling more in AI, and you've been our notoriously old man shakes fist at cloud.
Oh my goodness, am I an old man shaking fist at cloud lately? I really am. I think AI is making me dumber, which, I mean, to get dumber than I currently am, that's a pretty big feat. But I honestly do I think we're in big trouble in some ways with our cognitive reasoning skills, like especially for me being an old man. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be ageist here or whatever, but I feel like this is the first time in my career I felt like, wow, things are moving fast and I'm having trouble keeping up. Like when I was younger, I was like, things are moving fast, but this is awesome. I love it. Now it's like, can we just maybe not change something for a few months? Because I think we just redid everything and now we're redoing it again. But on the same, I saw somebody posted this earlier today and it really rang true to me. And I've heard something similar about another scenario. So the thing I saw posted was basically like AI is making you dumber. You used to be able to think about what you wanted to say. You used to be able to write cognitively, and you used to be able to figure out what your code should do. And now it's basically like you copy paste your code So you don't really think about what your code needed to do. You let ChatGPT solve the algorithm for you, and you basically just copy paste it and tweak it a little bit. When you go to write an email or a document of any type anymore, are you really writing it yourself at this point? If you are, newsflash, you're doing it wrong. But on the same token, if you want your own voice, you need to be really careful. And we are getting to the point. I saw something about like a Stanford or some big name school like that. Their engineer graduate was interviewing for a role, and they asked him some questions, and the person couldn't answer the questions because they didn't have ChatGPT to help them think. And I'm like, boy, we are in big trouble. But yeah, going back to the whole AI thing, it is a phenomenally fast moving world with a lot of stuff that isn't as reasonably concrete in my mind as normal coding and normal IT work has been. And a good example of that, I don't like just throwing things out. Like I always rail on my students if they write a paper and they say something like, and of course this is how it should be or whatever, like, then they don't give an example. So an example of this, oh crap, old man losing brain has lost train of thought. What was I saying? I was talking about AI.
Yeah, well, you think about that, I think there was a link I saw posted by Gizmodo that Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon actually did a research study that the more dependent you are on AI, the more your cognitive abilities tend to deteriorate. And it's a really interesting study because, so just yesterday, actually, it was probably earlier in the week, but anyway, earlier this week, we are in one of our rooms doing this, I don't know what you want to call it. It's basically like picture frame kind of things. And I basically, in school, you hear writing story problems are great because, you're going to need it. It helps you with real critical thinking skills. And I was always okay at them. So, I was like, this is boring. First, second, third grade, those kind of things, you're just writing them over and over and over. You're like, I get it. I can turn the math problem into words. Today, or that day, was the first day it really helped in my mind because I could say, hey, I need, all of these different measurements cut. So 4 pieces of wood at this dimension, 12 pieces of wood at this dimension, and the supply is 12 feet long of wood. I can't, when you're mid strip, you can't necessarily take 2 pieces and put them together and make them look right. So it's okay, each individual cut needs to be from the 12-foot wood. What is the least amount of wood I can buy and be able to, do the project I need to do? And I just wrote that story problem, gave it to ChatGPT, and then it went through and was like, hey, here's the least amount of wood you can buy and still have some left over. And that was kind of a light bulb moment in my mind when I see an article that helps hurt your critical thinking, all that. Could I have sat down and been like, okay, I need this many, get the remainders in such a way that, okay, if I finagle it just this way, here's the exact, yeah, I could have. But with ChatGPT, I just threw in my story problem and I got the answer I needed without having to do any conversions, because my measurements are also in inches, not in feet. So I didn't have to take the time to go, I need, 6 52-inch cuts and 5 blah, 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 so on and so forth. I could just plug in the entire story problem, say, hey, the lumber comes in 12 feet increments, give me the least amount of wood. And that was actually really cool because I thought the lumber was in 8 feet increments. And I noticed for some reason at the department store, 12-foot increments were cheaper. So I also could have walked in with completely the wrong math because I assumed it was 8 feet. But I got to the store and 12 feet of wood was actually cheaper than 8. So I just changed my, my formula asking for increments of 8 feet to 12 feet. It redid all the calculations in, 10 seconds max. And then I walked out of there with 7 things of 12 feet wood. And now my project's going. And I didn't have to pull out the notebook and redo all my math because, hey, 4 feet longer of wood is actually 25% cheaper. I'd be dumb not to buy that. But yeah, I think that's where I could see that potentially hurting is.
You didn't have to do all the hard work of thinking through the permutations of the math and, what are my options for each cut on each board.
Right. And as I start shaving it down, maybe the optimal is, 1 big cut, 1 small cut in a piece of wood or, those kind of things. They could just be here. And the other thing is it gives you the full game plan too. Of hey, do this many cuts on these and then you'll have some left over and do this. And But yeah, I'll
The
share the
curious
Gizmodo
thing
link.
I would have then is, so there's a couple things to consider that if you don't get it right with AI, the mistakes could happen. So one thing is if you're doing like a 45-degree miter cut and you have to then do a 45-degree in the other direction because otherwise the boards won't connect. If you forget to explain that, it might think you're cutting one cut to make two pieces rather than having to also shave another, whatever the inches off would be. If it's a 4-inch board, whatever the math is for a 45-degree angle against a 4-inch board, that gets wasted, right? Excuse me. So that's something that would be interesting, or just even the thickness of the saw blade itself not being accounted for and taking an extra 1/4 inch or extra 1/8 of an inch off of the wood just from the saw blade itself. Things that humans think through immediately because you're looking at it going, oh, cognitive reasoning says I've actually taken, instead of 8 foot, I've taken 8 foot and 1/8 of an inch off of this board.
Yeah, and that's where I tried to get a little bit ahead of that by doing the external perimeter of the thing I'm building. So it's like, okay, here's the longest length at each point that the board needs to be. So if I do the 45-inch or 45-degree angle, hopefully tip to tip. And then because I didn't trust AI, I bought 2 extra boards just because I can return them if I don't cut them.
You don't trust AI or you don't trust yourself. Let's be honest here.
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a guy who's actually putting it up who's better at all that than I am. And
he's probably like, where did you come up with these ridiculous numbers?
Well, so yeah, we duct taped it all out, or painters taped it all out of just so we could show him. Be like, all I really know for sure is I want a 4-inch gap perimeter around this thing, and then all of my other measurements are, I'd say close, but I wouldn't use them. But yeah, so he probably went out there.
His second question is, how do I use the tool? Because that would have saved me hours on my last job.
Right.
Hey,
oh,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah. So then he went and probably got real accurate measurements and lined it up all with a real level and all that sort of fun stuff. While I'm just sitting here, I also didn't get a step stool, so the one on the roof or on the ceiling, I'm with my wife who's way shorter than me, trying to pull it tight and get it level with a laser level just right, and it wasn't perfect, but yeah, it gave us a rough idea of what I needed the measurements for, so I could get a rough idea of how much lumber I needed. Yeah. So assuming
that Alec doesn't actually edit this, and it was roughly 7 to 10 minutes ago, I was talking about something and couldn't remember my idea. But the thing was an example for where AI is not concrete. And the idea here is okay, so I sit down so as a trainer, I need to learn AI. I mean, there's just no way around it, right? But even as a human in this world, if you want to be anywhere in the IT world at this point, you need to learn AI. So I want to learn. So I'm going in and I'm like, okay, well, Microsoft has a ton of repos out there already to learn Gen AI and make agents and all the things that are all these buzzwords that are these are fantastic. And I'm like, what do they do? How do I use them? And I struggle with the assumptions that are made by the experts writing some of the material. And so then you ask a bunch of questions where honestly, I have found a tool like ChatGPT has been a huge help to answer some questions behind the scene that I think the writers or the authors of the original AI material kind of assumed you would just know coming into this at this point, or maybe I didn't do the bare minimum entry level thing that I should have done. I've done some things, but an example of AI not being concrete finally is tokens. What the heck is a token? And why am I paying by tokens? And what does that mean for me? Am I going to be spending a bloody fortune on this? And then, by the way, there's 87 variants of models. And so, but in Microsoft's,
I think there's close to 2,000 if you want to be in the Microsoft world.
Okay, so 2,000 variants of models-ish. But AI Foundry is actually quite easy to use. And what I ended up finding, and Alec knows this because Alec is on the receiving end of my old man shaking fist messages through LinkedIn going, can you believe this nonsense? It doesn't make any sense. And this code that they have in the sample doesn't even work. And oh yeah, by the way, there's a new thing coming out. So if I turn on preview, I get the .NET package for a new AI inference thing that actually seems to be really useful for these things I'm going to be doing. And but the documentation doesn't have it. And then I found out after I struggled, and even ChatGPT couldn't give me the answer of the code, by the way, because it was use this thing, use that thing, use this thing. And I'm like, that doesn't exist. That's not a property. It's not real. You're hallucinating and it's not a thing. I went into AI Foundry and just by dumb luck, clicked on something and noticed, oh, by the way, there's code samples right here. And oh, that's the code sample that I came up that actually pretty close to exactly what I ended up getting to work. And I was like, oh, dude, where is this at all my life? Right? So the AI Foundry is actually really impressive. Like you can deploy your model there. You can go out there and you can start working with, like say you wanted to do the chat GPT 4.0 or GPT 4.0 mini or 3.5 turbo or whatever version you want to use. You say, hey, I'd like to deploy this. And I don't think it costs money to deploy it. I could be wrong, but I think it only costs money if you're reserving it or if you're like, if you get a reserved instance of it where you're saying, I'm going to use this many tokens, so let's pay a monthly fee or whatever, which you're not doing as a human by yourself, or you're crazy rich and need to make like millions and millions of calls per minute, because that's the only time that really makes sense based on what I've read. Now, I could be wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because I am also learning lots of stuff right now. But with that in mind, it does say, you got to put these tokens into play and how many tokens you're going to use. So you kind of have this like, boy, here we go. Am I going to get $1,000 bill next month? And maybe I'll limit how many times I actually run my code just to make sure I'm not charging myself too much money. Well, so I started building this thing and I ended up getting ChatGPT to work through C# code, which actually was quite intuitive and pretty straightforward. Although I think, Alec, you said I got something wrong that we need to correct about the streaming, which is awesome. We'll figure that out later. But that being said, even with that error, where I think you said I was basically streaming too many tokens because I was doing the full payload back and forth or something, instead of just the part I needed. And so I think we got to figure that out. But, that's stuff to learn. With that in play, I also, I wanted to do a thing called embeddings, which apparently is going to be really important for AI search, Azure AI search, which is what I'm going to need for this project I'm trying to build. And so I did a small text 3 small model for that. I think it's text 3 something. Anyway, and that works great to generate the embeddings. Again, the code was a little bit hard to figure out. And then it was in the Foundry. So I wish I would have known about that at that point. But I got ChatGPT, essentially, where I can send a console app, I can send a question and get a response. And I got the ability to also generate the embeddings on that so that I could record those into guess where. Guess where is recommended for me to store all my embeddings. You're never going to guess what my favorite tool is going to be in this whole project.
There's two options, either AI search, but because you're saying that, I'm assuming Cosmos.
It is. So I have maybe potentially found my favorite reason for Cosmos. I am super excited because here's the thing, the embeddings generate like a ton of floating points, right? Like a ton of them. And I'm not really entirely sure how this works. So I had to riff with ChatGPT a little bit on this, and it was really interesting because this is exactly why you need to know all the things. Because it's like you can choose to use this as your partition or that as your partition. One of them was ID and the other one was category. And, when I train on these things, exactly like what ChatGPT was saying, if you want to partition evenly across the partitions in Cosmos, you need to use the most unique thing possible, which is the generated ID. But if you want to query efficiently against the category, then you want to consider using that as your partition so that now you've got a better query response. So you're not using all the RUs to get something by category, that it has to have to do what essentially is a table scan across all of your Cosmos buckets, right? So me and ChatGPT were having some words. It's like, well, ChatGPT was like, you should use category. And I said, didn't you tell me that for the next part where we're actually going to do the querying, we're going to use Azure AI search? And it's like, yeah. I'm like, can that handle, because didn't you also say, ChatGPT is telling me everything, I don't know anything. So again, like I said, I'm getting dumber and ChatGPT is getting smarter and I just need to ask the right questions. So ChatGPT said that if I put all my stuff in Azure AI search, it will handle the querying for me. And I said, well, doesn't that mean I don't care about my underlying partition in Cosmos? And I said, well, you should use the one that's the most distributed then. And I said, so ID. And it's like, absolutely. Like ChatGPT is like, that's a great answer. You should use ID. I'm like, thanks. I thought of that all by myself. So yeah, ChatGPT has recommended I actually asked if I could use table storage and it said no.
You could also use SQL. So let me take a step back all the way to the beginning.
Okay.
You don't pay to deploy a model if you deploy it through serverless. So if you do a serverless deployment, and that cuts down your almost 2,000 options to like 80-ish as far as serverless goes. Tokens are hard because there's no fixed answer. A token is roughly 4 English characters-ish. There is a pricing difference on an input token, which is basically what you're feeding into the model, and then an output token where the model's actually doing compute to figure out like what the heck it's actually answering. It's a little cheaper to read in input tokens, so like reading in your content, than like making the model think harder, basically. And you can kind of think of it as a car, right? Like if your car is idling, it's using less gas, but it's still using some, versus if you're like trying to fly down the interstate, right? The output is you moving the vehicle. The idle is like it just sitting there and running and ready to go. So that's the way, those two things. You can estimate tokens. ChatGPT has a tokenizer estimator. So you can put in words and whatnot to see roughly like what the input tokens would be. There is, to your next point of streaming, the typical example, AI Foundry is a great way to start. Start walking through there. They have ways to connect with your data. So if you want to chat with your data, how to put that in there. They use pretty much just AI search. So you can skip Cosmos altogether if you want to. There's even Python scripts that Microsoft has out there to basically embed your text data into AI search, and it'll put it in there, index it, and chunk it for you. All you have to do is give it like your AI search index and the key to be able to access it. You talked about models for embedding. I think text embedding Ada 2 is the gold standard as of right now in Azure if you're going to be in the GPT family. There might be better ones if you're looking outside of just GPT. I tend to stay in the GPT sphere just because. I don't know why. And then GPT-4o Mini right now is the best bang for your buck model-wise. If you are able to deploy it, that's the one you probably want to use. It's substantially cheaper than anything else out there. But even anything else out there, we're talking in terms of millions of tokens. You're paying like $10, I think, for 4o. For Mini, it's like $1. We're talking very small amounts of money. You shouldn't, unless you do something real crazy, rack up a giant bill. I've pushed GPT-4o Mini to its token limit multiple times by mistake and asked questions up into that point. I think I charged $5 for Microsoft for all that. So it's hard to drive up a huge cost. But yeah, I would say the standard bare minimum, if you want infrastructure to do chat with your data or have data, is an Azure AI instance, like AI Foundry, with a GPT model or some sort of text model. GPT is the best if you're going to do chat with your data because they have chat with your data endpoints already available. You'll deploy that. Then you need an embedding model, which basically vectorizes and chunks your data, which is just a fancy way of saying it cuts it up to a point that the AI model can read it and understand it. Then it'll seed it in AI search so that it's there. It's like basically your database at that point. You don't have to touch it. You don't have to worry about your data anymore. You can build jobs and whatever to continually update your index if you want to, but as far as that goes, that would be the place that you add. Cosmos is really great if you start doing transactional stuff. Like if you're planning to regularly and frequently add to the data, Microsoft does have a chat with your data solution that is powered by Cosmos. They also have an AI search demo, which is chatting with your data that's powered by just AI search. So you just kind of need to ask yourself, like, how often are you going to be updating this index? And how wide is that going to be? Is that all of your AI Foundry samples tend to be pretty good. The only thing is that's a little bit weird is if you're not in a streaming paradigm where you work, the out-of-the-box sample, last I knew, actually streams the response from the model back to you. So if you're trying to parse data and do a typical like API strategy, where I have my model, I'm going to map it to this data and then I'm going to display it. It gets a little difficult because then you're throwing in this, hey, this one API is just streaming to us. There is an async await API, so you can just make a normal REST API call and not have to stream the data back. So you can basically say like, hey, just await this. I don't want to touch it till it comes back. That has citations, that has your score of how well it thinks it did. You can have it come back with multiple choices too if you want to have multiple options. And it's just, in my opinion, easier to display at that point if you're doing like a backend for front-end app, because you have a fixed model that then you can guarantee and start, hey, this field goes to this part, this field goes to this part, instead of just as soon as it gets back, I want to stream it to the front end, and that can get a little gross. But yeah, I think that was most of the things you brought up. Documentation, like you said, a lot of this stuff is in preview. A lot of documentation's out of date almost immediately, so it is fun. Sometimes you feel like you're walking through a cave without a headlight and you're just hitting your head on the wall just because, the documentation is there, but you're still exploring a cave that not many people have been in.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because Microsoft Learn documentation might have one set of code and the Foundry might have another, or at least in my experience of what I was learning this week. Now, with that in mind, again, please keep in mind that it could be a PEBCAC error and it was just me the whole time. But let's circle back around a little bit to Microsoft Learn. I love Microsoft Learn. Obviously, as a trainer, I live there, and all the other things. But it does have the ecosystem availability now that you can contribute to it. So if you find code errors, you should be able to submit pull requests on it. I've never done it,
I have. It's not terrible.
Yeah, it should
just
not
open
be.
a pull request.
So what do? You fork the repo for the docs, and then you just make your change and push it out and tell them why you did it? Or, okay, you don't have to have like a ticket or something. Cool.
No, typically what it does is there's like a fixed PR template for most of the repositories. So there's there's a contribute button or something to that effect on the docs page that you can click on. And then I think it automatically does the fork for you. Then you make your change. And then when you make your change, you basically say, hey, I'm going to do a pull request. And by default, it tries to phone back to, the main Microsoft repo. They have their pull request template. You just go through, fill all that out, and then open up a PR. It's pretty painless, all things considered. But yeah, and then, you've made your change and now you're a contributor to Microsoft, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, so I just went out really quick while you were talking. I went to Learn. I just went to Azure App Service. Under the quick starts, there's a deploy ASP.NET. On the top of it, I know you users can't see this. We're talking on a radio call here or whatever, but, a radio show, we're radio stars, yeah. At the top of the documentation, it says Learn Azure App Service Web Apps in the breadcrumbs, and then over to the right of that, there's a plus to add it to your collection or add it to your plan. Next to that, there's an edit pencil, and if you hit the edit pencil, it says edit this doc, and it takes you to the Microsoft Azure Docs repo where that page is. And so from that point, I think you would still have to manually fork it and remember what page you were on, and then make the change in your.
I think if you hit edit in GitHub, it'll do that for you automatically.
It did not. It opened it up as if I can make something. You're making changes in a project you don't have write access to. Submitting a change will write it to a new branch in your fork. Oh yeah. So now I already have a fork of Azure Docs. So maybe that is what's going on here. So it does say if I make a change, it's going to make it into a new branch in my fork. So I think you're right. I think you're correct. It is going to be super easy to integrate and make changes. Now that's really cool. That we do have, it's not a whole just submit to Microsoft and say, hey, I think there's something wrong with your documentation. It's like, hey, you see something you think should be fixed? Prove it. Like, write the code to fix it, put it in play, make a branch, push the pull request, and explain why you did it, and see what happens.
Add to your resume that you're now a contributor at Microsoft.
Yeah, there is if you're going to, just as FYI, if you are going to try to be a contributor on any Microsoft repo, you do have to sign a bunch of agreements. Prove you're not going to be like some wacko trying to take down the world or something. But yeah, I've spent a grand total of 2 cents on my outbound GPT-4o and $0 on my inbound and $0 on my text embedding 3 small regional tokens. So with all the testing I've done over this week, which isn't an extensive amount, I have spent 2 cents on my AI endeavor.
And I think 4.0 is like 10 times more expensive than 4.0 mini, if not more.
The thing that I'm doing ultimately is going to need 4.0. So
right. And that's
4.0
fair.
mini is great for most
I think
things.
It just depends on, knowing what use case you need and what model you need for that. But I think, Brian, this will probably come out while we're in Seattle or maybe on planes. Is there any last plugs you want to give?
So it's Pi Day today as we're recording this.
It is.
And so I made the mistake, though, of not opening Sci-Fi DevCon until St. Patrick's Day. I should have opened it up today for Pi Day. But that by the time you're listening to this, the CFP for Sci-Fi DevCon, which is a virtual fun event thing that I run, calendar event for the month of May. May the 4th be with you, or this is the May is what we've been calling it since The Mandalorian came out.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, it's a sci-fi themed, Marvel themed. You know, if you've ever been to any Galaxy Con or Wizard Con or Comic Con or, you know, Star Trek, you know, Wrath of Khan, I'm just kidding. Any of the cons where you would potentially find even like game boards or, you know, board game cons or like sci-fi cons or anything like that. If you have a favorite series, like, I don't know, maybe your favorite series is wisely like Star Trek Deep Space Nine or something, right? So then you want to do a talk on something in Azure and you're like, wow, what if I make a space station called Deep Space Nine? And then I talk about how to do that in Azure. That's exactly the kind of talk we're looking for. And honestly, like, we take all talks, so it doesn't have to be sci-fi themed. If you just want to be a speaker and you've never spoken, it's a great chance to do that. It's completely free for everybody to attend, so there's no speaker gifts, there's no speaker fees or nothing like that, because basically you're going to create your own video and submit it either on your own YouTube or submit it to me and we'll host it for you. If you want to do a live thing, some people insist on doing things live. You're on your own for that. You just need to tell me what time and the link, and I'll put it on the page. And so all those options are available. So that's really the main thing that's on my mind right now, is just getting people to present for that.
Awesome. That's a great event. I'll make sure to plug it in the links here when this comes out. But otherwise, thanks everybody for listening. And we'll see you everybody next time. Bye, everybody.